begin to start, so, and I'll watch out for Fiona. Okay, I'm going to let people in. Hello to everybody who is entering the meeting at the moment. We're just letting a very large group of people in, so bear with us as we're letting everybody into the meeting. I'm just still admitting people, so it's going to take a couple of minutes before we start the event today. We have theoretically quite a lot of people coming today, so we just imagine that you're at Avid Reader. It's a lovely sunny, crisp, sunny autumn morning, and you're all milling around out the back on the back deck, finding your seats. You've probably got a glass of orange juice at this time of the day rather than a glass of wine. I think that would be more appropriate for a Sunday morning, although, you know, you never know. There's been plenty of boozy Sunday morning event at Avid Reader over the years. So I'm just admitting some more people. And we'll start in a couple of minutes. Just as you're waiting though, if you're new to Zoom, do remember that there are two views you can see. So if you put your cursor to the top of your screen, you can see either speaker view or you can see gallery view. Now, for the event itself, it might be easier if you use it on speaker view, where when one person's speaking, you can see their face front and center on the screen. The gallery view, you can see everybody who's in the meeting, but you can't see the speaker's face very large. So it's up to you how you set your computer, but I do recommend speaker view for the content so that you can get to see the people who are talking about the books. And also, the other thing is down the bottom of your screen, there's a little thing called chat with a little text box that is a chat box. And so that chat box at the bottom of the screen is where you'll be able to send your questions or ask questions or comments. Tell me that you've enjoyed a book that somebody is talking about, or that you want to read it. If you want to interact with me, that's the place to do it. And what I am doing is, I'm just to show you the chat box, I'm going to show you the link to the autumn reading guide. I'm going to send that to you all in chat right now, the link to the autumn reading guide, just as I have some more people entering the room. So here we go. Here is the link to the autumn reading guide. And also you'll note that there is a 10% discount. And you just need to use autumn, all in caps. And that, I think I didn't send it to you all. I'm just going to actually resend that because I sent it to one person. Here we go. I'm going to send this to everybody in the meeting. And there's a 10% discount on all the books from the autumn reading guide if you use that link and then use the discount autumn, all in capitals, at the checkout. All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody. We've got quite a big group here today, which is fantastic. So I'd like to welcome you all to the Avid Reader Bookshop on this fine autumn morning. And I'd like to start by paying my respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the area in which we meet. At Avid Reader, we're meeting on the lands of the Yagara and the Turrbal people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, but also to acknowledge that we're having people from all over Australia here. And so I'd really, really like to pay my respects to elders from all over Australia as we're meeting via Zoom across the country, and to acknowledge that this has always been storytelling land for as long as memory goes back, and that sovereignty was never ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Now on that note, I'd also like to say that Fiona Stager, who will be joining us shortly, has had audio trouble on the computer that she was using, and so she is quickly changing computers. And so I will watch out for her to join the group, and then I will unmute her so that she can join the conversation. But until that time, we have two other Avid Reader staff members who are here to talk to you a little bit about some of the books that they have in the Autumn Reading Guide. And do remember that Autumn Reading Guide is in that chat box for everybody to have a look at. And so please feel free to, at any time, duck over to that Autumn Reading Guide and order the books that you like off the guide. And you'll be able to get a 10% discount if you use the keyword of autumn, all in caps. So that's my spiel, my bookseller spiel for the beginning of this launch of the Autumn Reading Guide. I think that we have Fiona actually. So I think I'm just going to admit Fiona to the room, and in theory, I'll be able to get her to speak first. So I'm just admitting Fiona to the room. No, I think that I'll just have to wait. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Sarah Deasy to you first, and Sarah Deasy will talk about her favourite books from the guide. So Sarah does all our buying, is our buyer at Avid Reader. So she does all our buying, and so the books that you do see on the shelf when she when the shop is open are all chosen by Sarah, and so she's got a really good handle on what we like as Avid Reader and what we like to stock. So I'm going to hand you over to Sarah right now. Sarah Deasy.
Hi everyone. This is my first time doing one of these online events with Avid, so thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us all. I'm Sarah, and as Chrissy said, I'm the buyer at Avid Reader, which means I get to see the publishers and see all the books and pick which books get stocked and featured in store. And I also helped put this Autumn Reading Guide together and did some reviews for it, and yeah, was able to choose which ones got in there. So I'm very happy to talk to you about some of my favourite reads from it. Everything that's going on right now has obviously put bookselling and publishing in a bit of turmoil, and some of the books in the guide, like the new Trent Dalton, for example, have been delayed until the end of the year. But all the ones that I'm talking about, and I hope Jennifer and Fiona as well, are still looking good to come out on as scheduled in the next month or two. So firstly, this one isn't going to be published until early June, but put your pre-orders in on the Avid Reader website. It is The Rain Heron by Robbie Arnott. I've got my reading copy here. You might remember Robbie from his debut novel Flames back in 2018. It was shortlisted for a lot of awards that year, including the Guardian's Not the Booker Prize. It was very experimental, where I think each chapter was written in a completely different writing style, told by a different character's perspective. And The Rain Heron still holds on to a little bit of that strangeness and wonder, but relatively it's much more of a straightforward story, and it blurs the line between myth and reality. The Rain Heron itself is this wonderfully imagined creature that is made from water, and it can bring rain and bounty and luck to the area it lives. But if you try and interfere and harm it in any way, it can take everything away just as quickly. In the book, it's a creature from old stories, but after there's a military coup in the kind of unspecified country which the novel set in, a group of soldiers are given the mission to capture the heron, and because men want things, they hear about something, and pretty soon they're convinced it belongs to them. It's definitely a novel about the environment and people's capacity for violence against the environment as well as each other. It's a novel that withholds information. You know something has happened in the world that caused this military coup, but it's never really clear what that was. Instead, you see the very personal effects of the war on people, and through them, the effects on the natural world. It's not at all a preachy environmental book. You can read it as a straight novel, or you can read into it as much as you want. but really it's all about balance and equilibrium and give and take. It's very original and compelling, and I'll definitely watch out for this one. Next, I wanted to talk about a book that I love that was published about a month or so ago. I know at the moment everyone seems to be gravitating towards books that are happy or escapist, which I totally get, but I really don't want this one to run under the radar. It's called Inland Sea by Madeline Watts, and it's definitely more of a slow burn, but for me it was really rewarding. It's about an unnamed young woman in her early 20s who lives in Sydney, and she's gotten a bit stuck with her life. She's taken time off from studying literature and creative writing at uni and has taken a job answering 000 calls for Telstra. It's a job that in order to be successful at, you have to develop a kind of attachment, and most people can't really last 3 months before the everyday pain and suffering of the callers becomes too much. But the apathy and disassociation she feels spills into her everyday life with increasingly self-destructive decisions, particularly in restarting a relationship with her ex-boyfriend. Threaded throughout the novel is the story of the narrator's great-great-great-great-grandfather, John Oxley. He was the explorer who was convinced there was an inland sea in the middle of Australia and set out on an obviously unsuccessful expedition to try and find it. It all ties in with the narrator's experience of coming in age in today's world with climate change and limited job security. Promises were made to the youth of today where if you followed the right path, you'd be able to make it, but there's a feeling of disappointment when the river that you're chasing runs dry. It's quite remarkable, and it did really affect me. We're actually doing a Zoom panel event with Madeline Watts on May 18th. So to hear more about it, you can definitely tune into that one. Now for a book that's a bit more of a nice escapism, the new Anne Tyler novel, Redhead on the Side of the Road. Sorry, I don't have reading copies here to show you the jackets of these ones. I've passed them on to other people to read. But it is nice and slim, just under 200 pages. And Anne just has this wonderful way of making everyday mundane things so intimate and engrossing. It follows Micah, who is seemingly very content with his life. He runs an kind of IT help business called Tech Hermit by himself, where he goes out in his little car and help old ladies with their email and computers. It's a very low responsibility job, but it keeps him busy enough. He goes for a run every morning and keeps a clean house. He has a woman friend, Cassia. He refuses to call someone in their 30s a girl for a girlfriend. But he keeps her just at the right arm's distance that they can lead their own lives. When Cassia's unauthorized pet cat puts her in the face of eviction, it's clear that Micah has been stunted in his life, and his happiness isn't just about controlling every aspect of your life. It's a wonderfully light book about second chances, and you can just fall into it, and I highly recommend it for someone who just wants to think about someone else's problems for a while. Now, I wanted to talk about a non-fiction book from the guide. I do mostly read fiction, but I've been listening to the podcast of The Ratland by Philippe Sands, and it's just been absolutely engrossing. So if you want a taste of his non-fiction book, War History, The Ratland, he has a podcast with the BBC. It's part biography, part detective story, part thriller. It's the story of SS Brigadier and the governor of Galicia in Germany, Otto Freer von Watscher, I think it's called. He was a Nazi fugitive, and during his time as governor, he oversaw the death of thousands of Jews during the war, including the family of the author Philippe Sands' own grandfather. So Philippe travels to Germany and meets with Watscher's son, who gives him access to a vast number of letters and diaries and documents from which Sands is able to write this account of the officer's daily life, as well as his subsequent years in hiding and fleeing through the rat line to potential safety in South America after the fall of the Reich. And this rat line passed through the Vatican, by the way. But one of the most intriguing parts of the book is the author's conversation with his son, with the officer's son in Germany. who even now believes his father and mother were good people. They were only following orders. They were never directly responsible for the war crimes that the war crimes tribunal say he was. It's quite fascinating how even now, family, just that feeling of defending your family. And finally, I wanted to talk about a wonderful novel by Brisbane author Mirandy Rio, which has been a favourite of a few staff at Avid Reader. It's set in far north Queensland during the gold rush, and it follows young siblings Ying and Lai Yu as they seek their fortunes in the goldfields to bring back to their indebted family in China. When things don't go to plan, they are forced to separate to find money, and it's a heartbreaking novel about displacement and exile, belonging and race, and as well as friendship, as Ying and Lai Yu struggle to survive in a country that really doesn't want them there. And really, it's pretty shitty for anyone who isn't a white man at that time. It's a pacey page-turner, and Mirandy's writing on late 19th century Australia is evocative and well-crafted. The landscape is harsh and unforgiving, and it's a story that usually isn't told when you think of the gold rush. Now, I know that Jennifer is going to talk about this book as well, so I'll leave it there and see if Jennifer wants to talk about Stone Sky Golden Mountain. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see all your wonderful faces and really lovely to be here. My name's Jennifer. I'm the book club's coordinator at Avid Reader. So we have lots of wonderful book clubs, which I think many of you actually I recognise who come to our book clubs. I also wanted to mention Mirandy's book, Stone Sky Gold Mountain. Mirandy is actually going to be joining us at our Australian book club on the first Tuesday of May. And so we'll be in conversation and talking about this one then. And I also just wanted to mention in relation to that book that I don't know if any of you have been there, but I've been to Maytown in North Queensland where the book is set. And when you go there, there's virtually nothing. This was a bustling gold rush town. And when you go there, you see some stone curbing, and there are historical society signs that say, well, the pub was here, and the gambling shanty was here, but there's virtually nothing there. And so I was really struck when I came to read Mirandy's book, because she's obviously researched meticulously, and she has recreated a bustling, extraordinary place. It's not somewhere you'd want to go. She evokes the sense of lawlessness that was there, the overwhelming maleness of the place, the isolation, the racism, the cricket fights, and I mean cricket fights between insects. And there's just devastation and poverty and the relentless heat, and the characters endure such deprivations. And so I just thought that was a remarkable achievement, seeing what she has evoked in her writing. And as Sarah said, it's a book that tells a part of our history that I don't think very many of us know anything much about. And certainly the perspectives of the Chinese immigrants is one that is not only interesting to read, but important to read. And I think it's really a wonderful one, and I recommend it to you. The next one I wanted to talk about is like many of you, in the last few weeks I had some trouble getting into reading, and I was attracted by this beautiful cover of Graham Swift's Here We Are. And when I picked it up, I found it a delightful novel and it was easy to slide right into it. Swift is a Booker Prize winner, and Here We Are is his 11th novel. It opens in the summer of 1959 in the Brighton Theatre at the end of the pier. And true to its beginnings, it's a theatrical novel. First, we meet Jack Robbins, and his stage name is Jack Robinson, as in quick as you can say. He's the compere of the show. He's a song and dance man. Then there's Ronnie Dean, and his stage name is Pablo, or even the Great Pablo. He's a magician. And then there's Evie White, known simply as Eve, the magician's assistant in Pablo and Eve. Now, I'm not revealing spoilers when I say this story is a love triangle. Swift plays this card straight up and rather theatrically foreshadows the future. The love triangle is interwoven with magic of the illusion-making kind, and it unfolds through time shifts and switching perspectives. And Swift deftly alters your allegiances in accordance with your growing understanding of each character and what's happened for them, what's really happened. We move back and forth between World War II and then to 1959 and then to the early 2000s. And he really brings these characters to life. Ronnie was evacuated from London during the Blitz to the country, as you know, many young people were. He was only 8. And for him, this was a really positive experience. He was taken in by Eric and Penny. And this is where Ronnie got his first introduction to magic from Eric. The only other characters who really feature in this story are the mothers of the three main characters. And it's their relationships that and how they influence their characters that he brings forth. There's a wonderful scene, quite memorable, when 8-year-old Ronnie is being evacuated and all of the mothers go to the train station to see their children off. And there's this scene of them they all take white handkerchiefs and they all wave these handkerchiefs to their children. And it's just beautiful. And I wanted to read you a little quote from that moment with Ronnie's mother, Agnes. "She dried her tears, her misery hardened, as it so often had before, into a sense of her own long-suffering fortitude." And with just a few words, he encapsulates her character just magnificently. When Ronnie fell for Evie, he also talks with her of the things that he shared with no one else. And there's some really beautiful, tender moments in the book. The parrot from the cover also has an important role to play, but I won't say anything more about that, as I think it's something for readers of this magical novel to discover for themselves. The next one I want to talk to you about is The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. This is Mandel's 5th novel. Her last novel, Station 11, was shortlisted for the National Book Award and won the 2015 Arthur C. Clarke Award. So Station 11 is a post-apocalyptic novel in which a deadly flu wipes out most of the world's population. I haven't read it, but apparently these two novels share some characters. So now I'm really interested to also read Station 11 because I absolutely loved The Glass Hotel. I found it surprising in so many ways. In the beginning, it seems that as readers, we'll be in the company of Paul and his half-sister Vincent. But as the novel progresses from the beautiful wilderness of Cayette, an island of British Columbia, to a seedy part of Vancouver, and then to Vincent's glamorous life in New York, living in what she calls the kingdom of money, characters come and go. Characters who initially seem side characters become main players, and the story shifts in utterly unpredictable ways. The wilderness of Cayette is changed irreversibly by this magnificent glass hotel. And it's a place where there's a sense of being outside of time and space. A mystery enshrouds an act of vandalism. The words, "Why don't you swallow broken glass?" are scrawled in acid marker on the glass of the lobby. and this mystery, and just a few ghosts of the novel. Meetings at the Hotel Cayette change people's lives. What I found particularly compelling is Mandel's exploration of human nature. Vincent meets Jonathan Alkaitis at the Hotel Cayette. Alkaitis is a money mastermind and he wins people's trust. He made you feel like you were joining a secret club, one person put it. And I'd like to read the character Leon Provence description of Jonathan Alkaitis. What Alkaitis had was presence. He had a voice made for late night radio, warm and reassuring. He radiated calm. He was a man utterly without bluster, confident but not arrogant, quick to smile at jokes, a steady, low-key, intelligent person, much more interested in listening than in talking about himself. He had that trick, and it was a trick, Leon realised later, of appearing utterly indifferent to what anyone thought of him, and in so doing, provoking the opposite anxiety in other people. What does Alkaitis think of me? Later in the years that he spent replaying this particular evening, Leon remembered a certain desire to impress Alkaitis. Mandel's characters, they contemplate counter lives where they haven't crossed the border between honesty and criminal lives. Her characters question if you can both know and not know something at the same time. Lies are troublingly easy. Lines between memory and imagined lives blur in what I found a fascinating exploration of the way the mind works. How we justify ourselves to ourselves is drawn extraordinarily. And I'd like to read you one brief paragraph because I think it gives a sense of Vincent and a sense of the tone of the novel. Vincent had never believed in love at first sight, but she did believe in recognition at first sight. She believed in understanding upon meeting someone for the first time that they were going to be important in her life. A sensation like recognizing a familiar face in an old photograph. In a sea of faces that mean nothing, one comes into focus, you. And that's quite an interesting little part of the novel. Characters in the Glass Hotel go from having everything to having nothing. They see ghosts, go to prison, escape to Mexico, and go to sea. It's a wonderful searching novel, and I absolutely loved it. The next one I want to talk with you about is Evie Wyld's The Bass Rock, I should say. This is a novel to really get your teeth into. It's early to say, I know, but I think it might be my best book of the year. Evie Wyld won the 2014 Miles Franklin Award with her novel, All the Birds Singing. It was a powerful, desolate, beautiful novel. She's Australian, but she lives now in the UK, and she's actually the co-owner of a bookshop. So her new novel, The Bass Rock, I think is even stronger than All the Birds Singing. When writing The Bass Rock, Wyld was thinking about the histories held by place, and in particular about the deaths of women, violent deaths that happened. And what Wyld has done with this novel is to tell three stories, all of which happen in a remote Scottish seaside town within the view of the Bass Rock. Now, the Bass Rock is about 2 kilometres off the shore, and it's a very extraordinary, strange volcanic rock with a strange shape. And it's home to a large colony of gannets. But then, so this rock sort of looms over everything that happens in the novel. And the narratives and their interconnectedness with each other and the place itself unfolds as we move between the characters' lives. So we start off in the present day. Each section is just simply called 1, 2, or 3, and you move between those sections. The first section is the story of Vivian, And Vivian is, she's struggling with the death of her father and really struggling with life. And so her family decide to give her the job of cataloguing the belongings in her step-grandmother's home, because the home is going to be sold. And they think that this job will be good for her. In doing this, it's basically a conduit into upturning some secrets from the past and ghosts from the past. And it takes us into the second story, and that is of her step-grandmother, Ruth. And Ruth is just a wonderful, wonderful character. For me, she's the heart of the story. She has ended up in this remote place because she's married a widower, and he has two sons who she's supposed to be the mother of, but the sons are sent to boarding school, and she's also struggling herself to try and have her own child, and having miscarriages and problems with that. So she's in a very very vulnerable position, and she's married to this man who is becoming increasingly distant. And there are women in her life who are I guess her lifelines. There's Betty, the housekeeper, and Betty's niece, Bernadette. So this is sort of our central story. And then there's another story, the third story, which is set in 1720s Scotland. And it is about a girl, Sarah, who has been accused of bewitching the men of the village. And because of this, they are saying she's a witch and they want to burn her. And interestingly, this third story is the only story in the novel where it's told from the male perspective. It's told through the eyes of a boy, Joseph. And Joseph is we meet him as a young, tender sort of boy who cares about this woman and her fate. But in this story, the third story, the misogyny and violence against women is out in the open. And its echoes carry through to Ruth's 1940 story and to Vivian's today. The violence emerges subtly until it is not. I found these stories utterly compelling, and Wilde interweaves their connections in fascinating ways. There are moments in the story that I want to hold on to for Ruth's sake, for Betty and Mary's sakes, for Vivian's sake, and for the boys' sakes. And one of the themes that stays with me from reading this novel is quite nicely put by Viv when she leaves a family photograph in the house that is to be sold. And she has the thought, there should be something remaining of the people who once lived here. And that's very much a theme of the novel, is thinking about place, what was, and how that travels through time, and how it can continue to affect and build in our lives today. So it's really quite a great book, and one I think would be great for book clubs. There's so much to discuss. So I really recommend it highly. The final one I wanted to talk about is just one that, not only because Mother's Day is coming up, but I thought this is a really lovely gift idea at the moment. The grandmothers, it's essays by 21st century grandmothers. And it opens with an Italian proverb, which is, if nothing is going well, call your grandmother, which I thought was quite lovely. It's really a wonderful collection. It's a diverse mix. There's 23 Australian grandmothers, and the editor, Helen Elliott, she writes, grandmothering has always been a grand subject, but it has never been outed as such. There's been no strong narrative about grandmothering. It is still closeted, too general to have interesting meaning, too often spoken about in a thoughtless, patronising tone. In a world where currency is all like a granny, describes someone who is not current, Nana Nap is insulting, as you will see in these essays. The grandmother narrative is circumscribed lazily connected to scented soap, lace, lavender, babysitting, caregiving, a latter-day invisibility. Grandmother still suggests a woman whose days of significance in the actual rushing world are past. Yet, French President Emmanuel Macron says that his grandmother, whom he called Manette, was the most important adult in his life. There are essays in this book from Helen Garner to Cheryl Curnow, Stephanie Alexander and Maggie Beer. There's a lovely essay from Alison Lester. She writes infectiously about play with her grandchildren, about catching sight of herself in public in orange tracksuit pants and cowboy boots, having completely forgotten that this was how she was dressed for getting down on the floor in comfort with her grandkids. She's podged to them, and its playfulness sets the tone for the type of grandmother she is. I really enjoyed Auntie Daphne Millwood's essay. She writes of how Nima is the name for grandmother in her clan, and of how she should fling my arms wide when I say grandmother, because with our people, there is a different idea of the word. I'm not just a grandmother to my 3 biological children, I'm a grandmother to so many others in my clan. And she talks about how in her culture, the elders carried the wisdom or the knowledge, or that deep knowledge that has been passed on orally. Grandmothers in all cultures do this. They keep the stories, tell the tales. It's, as a collection, I think it's wonderful to dip into, and it makes it so abundantly clear that there are as many ways of being a grandmother as there are grandmothers. I think it's a really, really lovely one. So thank you very much, and it's time to hand over to Fiona.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you so much, Sarah. Because of both of you, my to-be read pile has gotten even bigger. So thank you all so much for joining us. It's wonderful to see so many new and familiar faces. And this is a chance for us to say thank you to all of you, to all of our customers. When this whole crisis started, our commitment was that we were going to be there at the end, and I was going to do anything and everything possible to make sure that did happen. And because of all of you, we will make it. We're determined to make it. And also thank you because of the staff. You can see how talented they are, and we're also very nimble and very creative. So all the staff came together. We've quickly moved all of our events onto Zoom, and that's thanks to Chrissy. Chrissy's working out of what she calls the Australia's smallest office. And from what I can see, there's lots of plastic octopus in it, but I'm sure they're a great inspiration to you, Chrissy. Jennifer has moved our very many book clubs and the various book clubs that we do. She's moved them onto Zoom very successfully. And of course, the wonderful Sarah, ordering books. What do you order at this time? Are the books going to come? Where are they coming from? So Sarah's done an amazing job to ensure that the books are on the shelves. So thank you. As an industry, I think booksellers across Australia and across the world have responded really creatively. It's been amazing to see what we've done, and I'm really proud of being a bookseller and all the other booksellers out there. The good thing about the Zoom events is that we will keep doing them, because every time we've done them, we've had the best feedback, and it's something that we'll be able to incorporate into our existing events program once we return to some kind of vague normality. And every time we've done an event, there's been a really unique story. So the first one we did was Cass Moriarty and I, me interviewing Cass about all the many wonderful Australian books that she's read. And the feedback we got from that was fantastic. People who used to come to our events but have moved out of Brisbane, they were able to join us. People who've always wanted to come to our events but don't live in Brisbane now could. And there was a woman from London who joined us. We were all having a glass of wine, so that she was having a cup of tea because it was breakfast time. And there was even a woman on a military base in South Korea who was able to join us. So every time we've done a Zoom event, there's been something like that's happened. And it's also given me the chance to join some of the international events that are happening. I joined, there was Elena Ferrante, who we all know from her wonderful series. She's got a new book coming out. And I think that was due in June, and it's now been pushed back to September. But the American publisher organised an event with Anne Goldstein, the translator of Elena Ferrante's book, and it was just fascinating. It was a panel discussion about translation, and it was just great. So for me, it's been wonderful that I've been able to tap into these international conversations as well. Because I think Jennifer mentioned it too, I've been very distracted, especially 4 or 5 weeks ago, where I was waking up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning going, well, what's going to happen? Will we survive? And I was managing to read a little bit of crime fiction, but I was pretty much playing Scrabble online, which is a bit of an addiction. And then the other thing I've been doing is I've returned to my veggie garden. That's where I've been finding comfort and solace and distraction. And so I've been reading lots of blogs about growing veggies in southeast Queensland, which could sound very boring to most people, but in fact I find riveting. And also just trying to get my head around what was going to happen. But the book that got me back into reading was a book that Jennifer mentioned, and I also think Sarah has loved as well, and that's The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. So Jennifer did a great summary of it. For me, I felt like it was this amazing jigsaw puzzle that came together beautifully. I found it engrossing, very profound in many ways, especially a commentary about class, privilege, and that kind of sociopath character that does inhabit the financial world. So I highly recommend that as well. The other book I have loved is The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich. She's been one of my favourites for many years now. She has won the National Book Award, and she's been shortlisted for the Pulitzer Prize. She too owns a bookshop in a bookshop called Birchbark Books. She is from the Aweeba Chippewa First Nations clan group in the US, and a lot of her books have that grounding to them. And this one starts in the 1950s, and it's really going back to her grandfather and her father's time. So it's in North Dakota, and there is an act that's about to come into government, and it's this older man's response to that, and at the same time these really powerful women characters, one in particular called Pixie. So I found it very moving, very profound as well, and it's one of those ones where you're immediately there. I think for me, my reading at the moment, I just need to be in the book from the very first page. My patience is a little bit frayed, so I need to be in the book from the very first page, and that's how I felt with Louise Erdrich's latest book. And if you do love it, it's great to know that she has a really wonderful back catalogue as well. A special shout out to a book that I'm just about to start, and that's called A Theatre for Dreamers by Polly Sampson. And it's set on the island of Hydra in the 60s with Charmian Clift, George Johnson and Leonard Cohen as the main characters. And it's based on their stories. I'm a bit of a Charmian Clift tragic. I think there's probably other Charmian Clift tragics out there as well. So she was an Australian journalist and author who moved with George Johnson to the island of Hydra, and they were there for about 10 years. So they set up like an alternative community. They were escaping a very conservative Australia. I think from memory, George was already married when he and Charmian got together. Certainly when I was growing up, everybody knew George Johnson. We all had to read, what was that famous book of his? We did it at school. Oh, I can't remember. Yeah. So I kind of knew him, and like a lot of Australian women writers, their stories had been overlooked. So when I found Charmian Clift, I just read everything that she could. So I'm really looking forward to getting into Polly Sampson's latest novel. As well as doomsday prepping in the garden, I've also, just like many of us, returned to the kitchen with great passion. So Fallaston by Sammy Tamimi and Tara Wigley is fantastic. I've cooked so many recipes from it already. So Sammy Tamimi, he and Ottolenghi, they opened the first Ottolenghi restaurant cafe together. They worked on Jerusalem, the first book, together. And now this is Sammy returning to his Palestinian roots. So Ottolenghi, as we will know, he is Israeli and Sammy is Palestinian. And as Sammy and Tara write in the introduction, this is a political book. If you're writing a book with Palestinian history and recipes in it, food is political, and so they talk about that. There's some beautiful portraits of the producers and the farmers in Palestine. It's evocative, it's moving, and then the recipes are amazing. The beef kofta with potato, yogurt, and lemon is just life-changing. Like, I think about it all the time, and I'm going to make it for dinner tonight. The fish spice mix is just fantastic, and I just love it. The chicken za'atar, like, I could keep going on and on and on about the wonderful recipes I've cooked from it as well. And then I'm going to move, I did want to just mention very briefly the book. It's a non-fiction. It's about butterflies, The Language of Butterflies by Wendy Williams. That's coming out in June, fingers crossed, and that will be our non-fiction book of the month. I think anybody who is vaguely a bit of a garden, even a balcony garden, certainly anyone who's walking in the parks, the butterflies are extraordinary. It's been a perfect storm that's created all these amazing butterflies. There's a vine in the courtyard at the back of Avid, and it's just covered in flowers. And whenever I need a minute's solace, I'll go and I'll just stand and I'll just look at the butterflies. They're just beautiful. So Wendy Williams is a journalist. She started to do like just a basic article essay on butterflies and butterfly collectors. But like butterfly collecting, it is an addiction, and Wendy herself got sucked into the whole story around everything from butterfly identification, collection, smuggling, stealing, all of that. So I can't wait to get my hands on that and learn a little bit more about butterflies. Of course, to have butterflies, we have to have caterpillars, and the caterpillars are just destroying my hippeastrums at the moment. So, but I will forgive them because the outcome are the butterflies. And I just wanted to conclude with two really wonderful young adult books. And I'll draw your attention to Burn by Patrick Ness. He's been writing for quite a few years now, and I've read some of his books, but this one starts on a cold Sunday evening in early 1957. Sarah's waiting at the parking lot at the Chevron gas station for the dragon that her father has hired to come and work on their farm. So Sarah's mother has died. It's just her and her father. Life is very, very hard. And they're so desperate that they've hired a dragon to come down from Canada to help them clear the land. And while that might sound preposterous, because I did say a dragon, it is engrossing. It's also about, the being 1957, it brings in the Cold War and the beginnings of that. And I loved it. I just kind of raced through it. I thought it was really, really exciting. I think really there's a high body count. A lot of people seem to die, but I would have thought it'd be perfect for 14 plus. And then I'll finish with another beautiful young adult novel. It's called The Year the Maps Changed by Danielle Binks. It's the May release, and it's about a young girl called Fred. She lives on a coastal town in country Victoria with her grandfather and her adoptive stepfather. So her mother has died, so it's just her, and then her stepfather, he kind of repartners, and they're going to have a baby. So there's a lot of changes in Fred's life. She's dealing with things at school, but also it's set in the early 1990s, and the Kosovo Albanian refugees arrive in what is supposed to be a haven, but in fact turns out to be, a refugee camp, detention camp. It is so beautifully written and so evocative. It deals with lots of really complex issues, and I cried in about the third last chapter. I was on the bus and I was reading this section about Fred, and I just realised I'd spontaneously burst into tears, which is a bit embarrassing on a full 199 bus, especially when you're reading it. It's basically a children's book. But I think it's great for any age, really. It's probably 13 plus. But for me, as an adult reader, I found it just as satisfying as a whole lot of the other great fiction that I've read as well. So I think that is me racing through the autumn reading guide. There's some great things there. And I was so pleased and proud that Sarah could be joined with other leading national Australian booksellers to put this guide together. Thank you always to Christine for being the great host as well.
Well, I've got, I'll take over there. Thank you, Fiona. Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks, Sarah. I really did enjoy your chats. We've got a couple of questions that came through during the event, but one of them is about the guide itself. And if you want a physical guide, I put it in text, but I'll say it again. Just email books@avidreader.com.au and we will send you out a guide. There was also a question as to how long there's a 10% discount if you put autumn in at the checkout, and there was a question as to how long that will be available for. Now, I'm not quite sure if Fiona knows the answer to that question. Do you know how long?
I can find it.
Maybe a week. Yeah. We can make it a week.
We'll make it a week. So that's
Sarah's saying something, I think.
Sarah's saying something, and she's muted herself, so I have to unmute her. Sorry about the multitasking. I'm unmuting Sarah.
I've got dogs in the background, so I muted myself. I can double check, but I have a feeling Kev said maybe the 3rd of May, which was a week. Yeah,
great. So a week. It's the 3rd of May. That if you use autumn, you get 10% discount. So do follow that link. Somebody has asked, do we get the discount in person if we want to help save on shipping? And Fiona's nodding. So yep. Yeah, you can pick up the book. You can use the discount at the checkout and pick up the book. That's no problem at all. And of course, the shop is still open in a very strange way where you can turn up at the front door and pick up your books from the shop if you're local as well. So yes, we can do that. And there were a couple of other practical questions which were about what if we can get some information sent to people about the books that were talked about today. And yes, I will consolidate those and I'll email those out to the people that are on the meeting today. So you will be able to kind of look back on what was talked about and check that you've got the right book against your guide. So I will organise for that to be emailed out to everybody hopefully today. So you'll get another email with the list of the books, and then you can double check what you wanted to check out on the guide through that. So are there any other questions from the audience at the moment? As you're thinking of your questions, I'd like to just to acknowledge that I'm also reading Madeline Watts's book, Inland Sea, which will be for, we're actually going to be talking to Madeline as well as James Bradley and Lucy Trelaw about writing the Anthropocene. That's on the 18th of May. And Madeline Watts's book, again, I'm one of those people who's had trouble reading, and I was right in there with Madeline Watts's book. I think her voice is so easy to hook into that I'm really enjoying it. It's absolutely fantastic. So I do recommend that, as well as Mirandy Rewo's book. Mirandy's book, Stone Sky Gold Mountain, was another one that really hooked me in. So there is another question here. There's a couple of statements of people who enjoyed the session, and that there's lots more reading to do, and now they just need some more time. I think it's all statements at the moment. Thank you everybody for sending in your congratulations to us. We've really enjoyed talking to you. If anyone has a last question though before we log off, make sure you send it through now while we've got the panel. Otherwise we will leave you to your reading and to your purchasing. Any info on the Tom Keneally book is a question. I think that I think that's going to plan. I think that's still being published on time. It is.
It's out now.
Yeah. It's out now. Yep. And in fact, I have been in discussion to try and get Tom to talk to us via Zoom. So that hasn't landed yet, but keep your eye on the events program because Zoom events are landing all the time. I know that we definitely have Julia Baird's event has been rescheduled, but is on the cards again. So if you like phosphorescence, and a lot of you have, join us for Julia Baird's event. And also, yeah, if you are, there are a few people, just while I've got everybody, there were a few people who mistyped their own email addresses in. So I did spend quite a while this morning trying to work out your email addresses and to resend the link to you. So when you are typing your email address in for a Zoom event, it's really important that you type it correctly. Otherwise, you won't get the link if you type the wrong email address. Do make sure that you include your phone number as well so that I can text you and say what was that actual email address, and then I can send it through again. So yeah, I think that was a really successful chat. I know I got a lot out of hearing you guys chat. I'm not at the office at the moment, and so I miss out on all these discussions about books, and it's really fantastic to have you guys here with me in my tiny room talking about the books with us. So thanks everyone for coming. Thanks to Fiona, thanks to Jennifer, thanks to Sarah. Please keep being connected with us. We want to be here at the end. I know we will be. I'm going to unmute everybody so that we can all just clap. So, and then it will be chaos, and then I'll just stop the meeting. So thank you everyone. And we're all going to be unmuted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, Avid.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Big thumbs up.
Hi, Suzanne.
Yes, please.
Thank you all so much for coming. That was wonderful. Thank you. Lovely to see you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Fiona.